Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, we've got, again, highlighting the Southeast Alaska weather zone realignment that kicks into effect tomorrow, September 13th, and that's for the National Weather Service Juneau Forecast Office areas, as you can see on the map there to the right, outlining the new zone boundaries. And it affects public and fire, but not the marine zones, and should be transparent to most everyone. And this uses borough and census boundaries to help eliminate overwarning of NWS alerts across Southeast Alaska. That's the reason for the realignment. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, contact the website there, juneau.weather@noaa.gov, and you'll get more detailed information. And from there, going to hazardous weather graphic. Wind advisory continues for tonight, Monday night, and the Tuesday morning for the Alaska Range. And that's for winds possibly gusting as high as 50 to 65 miles per hour in areas there through the passes and the normal channeled areas. And you probably know who you are there, Delta Junction, for example, and through the Healy area. Otherwise, that's it for warnings and watches around the state. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see low pressure moving near Nunivak Island and edging eastward toward the southwest coast. Big cyclonic circulation there, counterclockwise circulation, and that pushing surges of moisture northeastward there across southern Alaska and up into the Copper River Basin, mostly as mid and high level clouds spreading up into the eastern interior there. And some of those clouds getting into the northern panhandle, but as of about mid-afternoon, only 1/100th of an inch of rainfall has fallen at Yakutat and Kodiak. A little bit heavier on the North Gulf Coast there, more under the precipitation-producing clouds, with roughly 3/4 of an inch falling, both at Seward and Cordova, about 1/10 of an inch in Anchorage. To 2/10 of an inch, some areas of the Susitna Valley. Other areas just seeing a few hundredths of an inch. And much of the central western interior had light rain throughout the day today, nothing heavy, really run 1/10 of an inch to maybe 1/4 of an inch in some areas, and a lot of areas just getting a few hundredths of an inch there. Winds kicking up in advance of that low, 25 to 30 or 35 miles an hour at most there over the southwest coast and southwest interior areas. Otherwise, another mostly sunny day there over the southern panhandle with temperatures rising into the 60s, and Shelter Cove came in with 71 degrees this afternoon. Clouds keeping it cooler to the north, but Juneau still reached 61, and those clouds will continue to increase overnight tonight, and eventually some rain may show up over the northern areas, light rain. And moving on to the chart, there's that low center near Nunivak Island, and that's producing a widespread area of light rain or showers from the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians right on up across much of the western interior. That front really weakening, just putting some light precipitation down, mostly in the form of real light rain or showers all the way up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Kelly, though, up in the northwest there, did pick up, I believe, 1/4 of an inch of rain, but that was the exception. Mostly dry over the central and eastern interior areas, and some spotty mixed precipitation up along the Arctic coast, locally into the North Slope, like Atchison, for example. But that's very light precipitation there, no more than 1 or 2/100ths of an inch at most. And again, mostly sunny over the southern southeast coast with warm temperatures, clouds increasing over the northern panhandle, and higher pressure trying to build in over the Aleutians. It's kind of a flat ridge, really just a lack of storminess more than the presence of high pressure out there, making for light winds and dry conditions from Atka Island all the way out to the Komodorskis. For tonight, though, a weak warm front will spread some moisture into the Komodorskis, but just not much change out west there. Low pressure finally edges into the Yukon Delta tonight and slowly weakens. A new low develops somewhere around Shelikof Strait, give or take the location there. It's pretty weak, and the associated front will increase the rain across, once again, south central Alaska. Mostly Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast southward. More showery as you get up north of the Susitna Valley. And not much of anything getting too far into the Copper River Basin. It stays dry over the Tanana Valley, Yukon Flats, right up to the eastern North Slope, Arctic coast. Maybe some very light precipitation, but nothing too terribly heavy there in the western Arctic coast. Some scattered showers. And chances of light rain start to increase over the northern panhandle there. Southern areas hang under that ridge of high pressure, keeping it dry with light winds. And winds will be a little brisk across the Alaska Peninsula. I believe small craft advisories out there, Pribilof Islands, maybe gusts 30 to 35 miles an hour out of the west and northwest. And for the day on Tuesday, we've got small craft advisories for the Arctic coast. East winds there anywhere from 25 to 30 miles an hour. And that front increases the rain over the northern panhandle from about Juneau northward. Better chance Haines up to Skagway over toward Elfin Cove. And of course, Yakutat will see more rain than what you saw today, that front edging eastward, but nothing heavy at all. And high pressure holds over the southern, or just west of Dixon Entrance, with a ridge up over the central and southern southeast coast. So another day tomorrow with some sunshine in the southern areas and temperatures back into the mid-60s or so. Otherwise, showers, Kodiak Island, areas of light rain, Bristol Bay, and up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Cloudy with rain, light rain, I'll say, over the entire southwest part of the state, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta. Comes a little more intermittent there over the Seward Peninsula, and then a little more showery up over the Brooks Range, with still breezy there from the Pribilofs down across the Alaska Peninsula. Those winds could gust 25 to 35 miles an hour, and that's about it. And warm front rains with that system out west, staying north of the Aleutians and well west of the Pribilofs there, with a trough keeping it kind of unsettled through the St. Lawrence Island area on up into the Chukchi Sea. Some of that moisture might just graze the western Arctic coast, but again, whatever falls will be quite light at best. And then for the day on Wednesday, that system moves eastward there. Pretty good low center, 978 millibars into the northwest bearing. They'll spread warm front rains into the Pribilof Islands with increasing southwest winds. Tuesday night, and then maybe break out a little bit or end on Wednesday as they get into the warm sector of that system there, with the warm front passing off to the northeast and the cold front still hanging back to the west, but that will spread rain into the western Aleutians. And light rain reaching the Alaska Peninsula, but pretty light, and the same pattern here over southern Alaska, cloudy with areas of light rain and showers. Actually now from the Tanana Valley, Yukon Flats looking showery, better chance of showers in the Tanana Valley down in the Copper River Basin, scattered showers there. Showery or areas of light rain, eastern North Gulf Coast, maybe possibly a dry day for Prince William Sound with some isolated showers. And now rain starts showing up along the central and south coast of the Panhandle late in the day, but that band of moisture or band of precipitation with that front is pretty narrow, and just a chance of rain along the coast of Prince of Wales Island. Increasing clouds and cooler, though, over the southern areas. Lows tonight, 45 to 50 for the Panhandle, and in the 40s for the remainder of southern Alaska. Highs tomorrow, 50s. Much of southern Alaska, southeast part of the state, Copper River Basin, Kodiak Island, upper 50s, as well as the McGrath-Nikolai area. Back into the mid, maybe upper 60s, possibly a 70 degrees showing up again over the southern Panhandle, but upper 50s with more clouds thickening in the north there, followed by lows about the same, except upper 30s now into the Copper River Basin, otherwise in the 40s, and upper 40s to lower 50s for the southeast coast, followed by highs cooler now with more clouds and increasing rain and moisture, lower 60s in the south, mid 50s in the north, 50s across the remainder of southern Alaska, Kuskokwim Valley, down to Bristol Bay, eastward to the Copper River Basin. Lows up north, again 30s, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, 40s south of the mountains, followed by highs lower 60s over the eastern interior, north of the Brooks Range, mostly in the 40s with 50s out until you get to the northern Bering Sea, upper 40s for St. Lawrence Island. Lows in the 40s south of the Brooks Range, north of the mountains there, North Slope Arctic coast in the 30s. Highs in the 50s now, a little cooler up in the interior there with more clouds, better chance of showers. Out to the west, lows tonight in the 40s, maybe 50 around Shimia, mid-40s St. Lawrence Island and the Pribilofs, followed by highs in the lower 50s or mid to upper 50s central Aleutians, and lower to mid-50s for the Alaska Peninsula. And Wednesday morning lows again in the mid-40s or mid to upper 40s most areas now. And highs, upper 50s Bristol Bay, 50s to near 60 for ADAC, and mid-50s for the Pribilofs.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And for flying weather, Tuesday morning, a lot of IFR across the western interior Arctic coast, down across all of southern Alaska, south of the Alaska Range, but the mid and upper Tanana Valley, it looks like all of the Tanana Valley, to the Yukon Flats area stays VFR. And marginal VFR now covers the Panhandle with increasing IFR up north. And marginal for the Bering Sea, next round of IFR right on the edge there, just west of Chimionat-2. And we'll see for the afternoon, that slides east-southeastward almost to Atka Island, but not quite, leaving the Aleutians in the marginal VFR zone, as well as the Pribilofs and the Alaska Peninsula. And then Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, just solid IFR there from the about just south of Kivalina, across Kotzebue, Seward Peninsula, right in across southern Alaska, as you can see, into the northern Panhandle, back to IFR there, and then marginal VFR continues down toward Dixon Entrance. IFR, north slope into portions of the Arctic coast. Risk of a thunderstorm there over the Selawik Valley, maybe the Kobuk Valley, also out on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range there, right on the edge of the marginal VFR zone. Otherwise, Wednesday morning, IFR for the north slope, most of the Arctic coast, VFR for the Brooks Range into the northern Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley areas, then IFR, northern Seward Peninsula, much of the interior, but the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, VFR down to Kuskokwim Bay, band of IFR pushing eastward to the Pribilofs and into the eastern Aleutians, marginal for the Alaska Peninsula, IFR, northern Panhandle, and Yakutat, but the eastern North Gulf Coast, marginal VFR up to the eastern Alaska Range, south central Alaska, IFR. And then it stays IFR for the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, and Copper River Basin up into the central interior, now IFR for the Yukon Flats area, and staying VFR north of the central and eastern Alaska Range in the 40-mile country up to even north of Eagle. Northern Panhandle, IFR, southern area, marginal. Lots of IFR out over the Bering Sea, and a good zone of marginal VFR from the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, southeastward across Bristol Bay. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR to IFR tomorrow as some moisture lifts northward throughout the day. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, just IFR most of the day, mostly IFR for rainy, windy, Isabel. Mentasta, IFR, lowest conditions southern entrance, a little bit better, but still marginal out the north side. And for Tanita, IFR, either approach. And for Portage, definitely IFR there. And for Chilkoot and White, back to IFR. And for the freezing levels, 4,000 feet over the Pribilofs, central Bering Sea, otherwise about 6,000 to 10,000 feet over the central western Aleutians with that 10,000 foot line north of Chimionat-2, otherwise about 6,000 feet plus eastern interior and 6,000 feet or 5,000 to 6,000 out toward the west coast, 8,000 to 10,000 feet over the Panhandle. Icing, good area of considerable moderate rime icing right up into eastern Turnagain Arm, across Prince William Sound into the North Gulf Coast Range, Yakutat down to about Elfin Cove, dry and icy bays, and increasing icing threats over the northern inside waters of the Panhandle, and that extends out to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, southern Kuskokwim Valley, the Aleutian Range, and Bristol Bay. And for the jet stream, deep trough with the center right over the southwest interior there. So on the west side of that trough, northwest winds, 33,000 feet, 110 to 105 knots across the Alaska Peninsula. On the east side, southwest winds up to 110 knots there in the Gulf of Alaska, up toward eastern North Gulf Coast, Yakutat area, about 65 in the northern Panhandle, 95 over the western Aleutians. 9,000-foot wind flow chart showing pretty good westerlies just north of the Aleutians across the southern Bering, 55 to 65 knots, northwest 40 for the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, southwest 45 right across Yakutat into the northern panhandle, but much lighter to the south, light winds over the interior areas. 3,000 feet, this shows some 35-knot east-southeast winds, basically east winds there for the eastern Arctic coast. Southwest 40 right up to the coastline of the eastern North Gulf Coast. Pretty light over the remainder of the panhandle. And 35 knots across the Bering Sea results in considerable moderate chop, Yakutat down toward Elfin Cove, and also the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. And joining us once again is our good friend Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. Thanks again for joining us, Eric. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy to be here, Dave.
Thanks. And, you know, we're going to ask you some more satellite questions here, but, you know,
Okay.
since you're a regular guest, we're going to give you a riddle this time, kind of a trick start to the show.
Okay.
How do you see a polar bear in a snowstorm?
Sounds like a challenging question because
Okay.
the polar bear is white and the snowstorm's white.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Well, in the world of satellite meteorology, you couldn't, because the spatial resolution of this instrument that we're going to talk about today has 375 meters resolution, and even the most well-fed polar bear will not be 375 meters across.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to run into such a
No, it'd be a
creature,
bad day.
would you? In the satellite meteorology world, the equivalent would be, how do you tell the difference between clouds and then an area that has no clouds but's covered by snow,
Right.
a piece of ocean that has no clouds but has sea ice? All three of these are white. The snow, the clouds, the sea ice, it's all white. So how, using satellite data, can you tell someone where the clouds are and where the clear areas are? This is important for aviators. Mariners want to know, in the ocean there, this white stuff, is that sea ice or is that just a cloud? How do we tell the difference? And it turns out, if you look, say, at a picture of Alaska from the springtime, March or April, and it's high noon, so we're getting a lot of sunshine. If you were riding on a satellite with your human eye, look down, everything's white.
Right.
And we've got a picture of Alaska from early April, and we're seeing some of the lower elevations in south central Alaska are melting out, getting some brown ground there. But otherwise, there's a whole lot of white on the image. What areas are cloudy, but what areas are clear and covered by snow or ice? It turns out that if we leave the visible spectrum behind a little bit. See, a satellite has multiple channels in the electromagnetic spectrum that it can look at. Part of that's visible light, what we see as humans, but there's a lot going on at other wavelengths. If we add in something that's called near infrared, what we couldn't quite see, but we're getting into that infrared territory, there's a magical property that we can exploit.
Secrets to find.
Oh yeah. This is actually powerful and almost magical, that at a slightly longer wavelength, when the sun shines down on Alaska and then it bounces off back to the satellite, at that near infrared wavelength, it turns out that snow and ice will absorb that wavelength, but liquid water, like liquid droplets in a cloud, will reflect it back. And that's not the way it works in visible. You know, visible, it just bounces off of all those targets the same. But at near infrared, snow and ice absorbs it, and the liquid will reflect it back. Liquid cloud droplets will do that. And so an image where everything looks white suddenly becomes colorful. And the way this recipe works is that the clouds look pink, and the snow-covered ground and the ice-covered ocean look blue. Suddenly now, we're able to see the polar bear in the snowstorm. We're able to see where the clouds are and where the snow is and where the ice is. This is a powerful advantage. Consider the case zooming into the Bering Strait area. What if you were asked to brief a pilot who wanted to fly, say, from Kotzebue down to Savunga or Gamble and had to fly VFR, visual flight rules, so they had to stay out of the clouds? Could you use a satellite image where everything is white to provide that pilot any guidance?
It'd be pretty tricky.
Very tricky. And that's why we have to go to this other recipe where the all-white polar bear in the snowstorm becomes more colorful. And now we can tell the pilot, aha, this is a cloud you want to stay out of, but over here, sure, it looks white in the visible spectrum, but what we're doing, we'll show you, oh, this is just snow-covered ground, but it's clear, so you can fly right through there, visual flight rules. Same thing for a mariner who might want to get down to St. Lawrence Island, say, but it has to avoid the sea ice. This product has applicability there as well.
Wonderful.
It's an amazing new technology, so many new channels. The satellite that makes this imagery actually has 22 different channels that it looks at.
22 secret decoder rings.
22 secret decoder rings.
Okay. You know, I liken this to an activity I had in the car when I was growing up. We go on long car rides, and we do all the work in these activity books to, you know, stay calm, cool, and collected for our parents who are trying to get us across the state. But to get the answer, the real answer, you had to apply that red sheet to see the answer or the secret path or whatever the message was in that activity book to get you onto the next page. And it's also like a photography filter, right? If you're taking a lot of pictures, you can apply different colors to see different parts of that image. I mean, that sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Oh, you know it. The information is in there all along. We just have to combine the channels in a way to reveal what's in there. And by the way, you're dating yourself. So you didn't have an iPad in the back of the car?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, we have, lastly, for dessert, there's a great image of this same kind of recipe. We're looking at South Central Alaska the first week of January. In first week of January, the sun, even at noon, is really low on the horizon, barely up. And in this image, the fun thing is the shadow of Denali. We can see the shadow of Denali over a lower pink cloud deck.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Denali at 20,000 feet casts a big shadow. So this is another, just for fun, kind of application here. This is called multispectral satellite imagery, and it's the future. And happily, the future is now.
Oh, that is fascinating. And 22 different secrets that can be revealed from just one satellite tool that's floating overhead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again. We can't wait to have you back and telling us more secrets of satellite technology that are passing over us every single day, many times a day, over Alaska and helping us all the way in many different parts of our lives. So thanks so much for joining us again.
Well, happy to be here.
All right. And thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with a little more weather here in just a few minutes. And of course, we'll have more Alaska weather facts anytime online.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to marine forecasts now, we've got west-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots on the south coast. And on the north coast, southwest to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas just under 10 feet. And for Clarence Strait, northwest winds 15 knots. Stevens Passage, looking at a southeast wind at about 20 tomorrow. And Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay, southeast at 15. And for Wednesday, Lynn Canal, south winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, south winds 25 knots, and southeast winds 20 knots for Clarence Strait. For the south coast, small craft advisories, south to southwest winds 25 knots. The north coast, south winds 25 knots, seas around 10 feet. Prince William Sound for Tuesday, east winds at 20 knots, seas 3 feet. And the eastern North Gulf Coast, small craft advisories, southwest winds 25 knots with 8-foot seas. For the Barren Islands, south winds at 15 knots with 5-foot seas. And Kamishak Bay, southeast winds at 15. And southern Cook Inlet, light southeast wind at 10 knots. North of the Foreland Zone, looking at northeast at 15. And then for the day on Wednesday, for Cook Inlet, light south to southwest winds at 10 knots and light variable winds for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, the North Gulf Coast, and Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island for Tuesday, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. In the Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisories, west winds 25 knots, seas 8 feet. Bristol Bay, west winds 20 knots. And then for the day on Wednesday, small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, west-southwest winds 25 to 30 knots. Small craft advisories continue for Bristol Bay. West winds at 25 knots. And for Kodiak Island, west-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, west winds for Tuesday 20 to 25 knots. Seas running 6 to 8 feet. Central Aleutians, west winds at 20 knots. And for the western Aleutians, southwest winds 20 knots. Seas 5 to 6 feet. And then we've got small craft advisories for the western Aleutians for northwest winds at 25 knots. Central Aleutians, southerly winds 30 to 35 knots with seas 9 to 14 feet. And the eastern Aleutians, Gale warnings on the Pacific side, southwest winds there at 35 knots, otherwise south to southwest on the Bering Sea side at about 30 knots. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, west winds 25 knots, Pribilofs, west winds 25 knots. And for St. Matthew Island and the Yukon Delta coast, winds will be out of the northwest at 25 knots, with seas at about 7 feet. Lighter winds for St. Lawrence Island, northwest at 15 knots and east 15 for Norton Sound. Real light winds for Norton Sound on Wednesday, southwest at 5 and seas at 2 feet. St. Lawrence Island winds will be southeast at 15 knots. And for the southwest coast, south to southwest winds 25 knots, and Pribilofs, south 25 knot winds in the forecast with 8-foot seas. And for Wednesday for St. Matthew Island, south winds 30 knots with 15-foot seas. Up along the Arctic coast, central and east side, east winds 30 knots, good for small craft advisories with 6 to 7-foot seas. East 25 in the western Arctic coast from Cape Beaufort to Wales, winds will be east at 15 knots. And then for the day Wednesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, south winds at 10 knots, and then easterlies start from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort at 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the western and central coast, east winds 25 knots and east winds at 30 knots for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, again, pretty dry over the eastern interior there, north of the Alaska Range, actually from the Copper River Basin on up. And then the western interior looking at showers, cloudy skies, some light rain as that low center tracks into the Yukon Delta and weakens. And rain for the North Gulf Coast, areas of rain, south central Alaska, mainly Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula, getting a little more showery in the Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin. Clouds increase, Panhandle with chance of rain up north. And then for Friday, a little bit better chance of seeing some rain there. Almost down to Sitka, but not quite, and probably from Juneau northward. Stays dry down to the south with chance of sunshine toward Dixon Entrance. Cloudy, unsettled southern Alaska, dry over the northern and eastern interior with some showers along the Brooks Range. Next system comes into the Bering Sea Wednesday, spreading rain and windier conditions with the frontal system into the central and northern Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, rain down to the Alaska Peninsula, and rain increasing along the Panhandle, especially up in the north. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.